For 8 years, I paid every single bill in that house: the mortgage, the electricity, the water, the insurance, $240,000 of my own money. And for 8 years, my family called me the freeloader. That night, the dining room felt smaller than usual. My sister Ashley's voice cut through the air like a slap. "If you're so smart, then pay your own bills." The whole table erupted in laughter. My aunt, my cousins, everyone. I felt my face burn. My hands trembled as I cleared the dishes, their laughter still ringing in my ears. No one saw the tears I blinked back. No one ever did. But later that night, I heard something that changed everything: a whisper between Ashley and my aunt about plans for the house, plans that didn't include me. By midnight, I was packing my bags. By morning, I was gone. 1 month later, Ashley called me in a panic. "Why is the power off?" My response, it left her completely speechless. Have you ever given everything to people who made you feel like nothing? My name is Crystal Becker. I am 38 years old, and I work as a freelance graphic designer from home. For the past 8 years, I have lived in the house where I grew up, the house my parents left behind, sharing it with my younger sister Ashley, who has never paid a single bill. It all began with a promise I made to my mother on her deathbed. She held my hand with what little strength she had left and whispered, "Take care of your sister. You're the strong one, Crystal. Family is everything." I was 30 years old. Ashley was 24, and I took those words as gospel. When we learned the house still had $95,000 left on the mortgage, everyone assumed we would sell. But I could not bear to lose the place where my mother had raised us, where her presence still lingered in the kitchen curtains and the garden she had loved. So I made a decision. I told the family I would handle the payments myself until we figured things out. No one questioned this. No one asked if Ashley would contribute. I assumed it was understood that sisters share burdens. That was my first mistake. In the second year, I gathered every ounce of courage I had and asked Ashley to split the electricity bill, just $200. Her reaction stunned me. She burst into tears. She accused me of being selfish, of not understanding how hard she was working at her sales job, of making her feel unwelcome in her own home. Before I could respond, she had called Aunt Linda, our mother's younger sister, who had always adored Ashley. That evening, Aunt Linda phoned me with a voice like ice. "Your sister is still grieving," she said. "How could you be so difficult?" I tried to explain. I tried to show her the bills. She hung up before I finished my second sentence. That night, I learned the unspoken rule of our family: Ashley's comfort would always matter more than my sacrifice. So I stopped asking. I just paid, month after month, year after year, the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the electricity, the water, the internet. Every single expense that kept that house standing came from my account. And somehow, impossibly, everyone still believed I was the one living off Ashley. 5 years ago, I thought things might change. I met David, a software engineer with kind eyes and a gentle laugh. For the first time since my mother's death, I felt hopeful. We talked about the future. We talked about building something together. Then one day, without warning, he pulled away. "I think you need to figure out your life first," he said. His words made no sense until I remembered seeing Ashley chatting with him privately at a family barbecue the week before. I had no proof of what she told him, but I knew my sister. She had always wanted whatever I had, and now she had taken something I could never get back. But even after David, I stayed. Even after the silence from the family, I stayed. I told myself it was for my mother. I told myself that one day Ashley would grow up and see what I had done for her. I told myself family was worth the pain. Then came the dinner that changed everything. You already know what Ashley said to me in front of everyone. You already know how they laughed. But what you do not know is what happened after I cleared those dishes and retreated to the hallway. I heard Ashley whispering to Aunt Linda in the kitchen. "The housing market is hot right now," she said. "I've been thinking about what to do with this house." My blood ran cold. For the first time in 8 years, I understood. Ashley was not just ungrateful. Ashley was not just cruel. Ashley was planning something, and I was standing in her way. That night, I did not cry. I sat in my room and did something I should have done years ago. I opened my laptop, pulled up my bank statements, and calculated exactly how much I had given to this house, to this family, to this lie: $240,000. And then one by one, I started downloading every single receipt. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my desk until the sun came up, downloading every bank statement, every receipt, every piece of evidence I could find. By morning, I had 8 years of financial records spread across my screen, and I had made a decision. I was not going to run away in tears, like Ashley probably expected. I was going to leave on my own terms with my eyes wide open and my documents in order. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared. I printed every bank statement from the past 8 years. I photographed every receipt I had ever saved, and I had saved them all because some part of me always knew this day might come. I created a spreadsheet that broke down every single payment I had made for that house. $1,200 for the mortgage each month, $350 for property taxes, $180 for homeowners insurance, $400 for electricity, water, and gas, $150 for internet and cable. It added up to roughly $2,500 every single month. Multiply that by 96 months, and you get a number that made my chest tight every time I looked at it. $240,000. That was what I had given to keep a roof over my sister's head while she told everyone I was the one living off her. Before I did anything else, I consulted a lawyer. I needed to know where I stood legally. The attorney was a sharp woman in her 50s who listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You may have grounds for an unjust enrichment claim. Your sister benefited from your payments while contributing nothing. But I have to be honest with you. Nothing is guaranteed in these cases. Family property disputes are messy. The best thing you can do right now is document everything and make sure you do not do anything that could be used against you later." I asked her what she meant. She said, "Do not cancel the utilities out of spite. That could be seen as damaging your own property or acting in bad faith. If you want to stop paying, transfer the accounts. Let your sister make the choice to pay or not pay. That way, whatever happens next is on her." So, that is exactly what I did. I called every utility company and every service provider. I explained that I was a co-owner of the property and that I would no longer be residing there. I requested that each account be transferred to the other co-owner, Ashley Becker. The companies sent notices to the house. Ashley had 14 days to activate the accounts under her own name, 14 days to pick up the phone, provide her information, and keep the lights on. The choice was entirely hers. I found a small studio apartment across town. It was nothing fancy, just a single room with a tiny kitchen and a window that let in the morning light. But it was mine. I paid the deposit, signed the lease, and moved out of my childhood home without saying a word to anyone. I left my key on the kitchen table. No note, no explanation. After 8 years of explanations that no one wanted to hear, I was done talking. The first few days were quiet. I half expected Ashley to call immediately, demanding to know where I was. But she did not. I think she assumed I would come crawling back the way I always had before. On the third day, I received a text from her. Not a question, not a plea, just 5 words that told me everything I needed to know. "You are going to regret this." That was it. No confusion about why the power had gone out. No asking what happened to the electricity. Just a threat. She already knew what I had done. And she was furious not because she was blindsided, but because I had disrupted whatever plan she had been building. By day 5, the water was shut off. By day 7, the internet was disconnected. Ashley's texts became more frequent, more hostile. She called me selfish. She called me spiteful. She said I was destroying the family. But not once did she ask me to explain. Not once did she say, "I did not know you were paying for everything." Because she had always known. She had simply never expected me to stop. I decided it was time to show the rest of the family what I had been carrying alone for 8 years. I composed an email and attached my spreadsheet. Every payment, every month, every dollar laid out in black and white. I sent it to Aunt Linda, to Cousin Marcus, to every relative who had ever looked at me with pity or judgment because they believed I was the sister who could not get her life together. The responses came quickly, and they revealed exactly who these people were. Aunt Linda replied within the hour. Her message was short and vicious. "You are trying to destroy your sister out of jealousy. I always knew you resented her success. This spreadsheet proves nothing, except how bitter you have become." I read those words 3 times. She did not dispute the numbers. She did not ask for proof. She simply decided that I was the villain, the way she always had. Cousin Marcus called me that evening. His voice was different, hesitant, almost embarrassed. "Crystal, I had no idea, he said. Is this real? Did you really pay all of this? I told him yes, every cent. He was quiet for a long moment, then said he needed time to process. I appreciated his honesty, even if I doubted anything would change. As for the rest of the family, they did what they had always done. They said nothing. They saw the evidence and chose silence. Some of them, I realized, had probably suspected the truth for years. They just did not care enough to ask. 2 weeks after I moved out, I received a phone call from a lawyer. Not my lawyer, Ashley's lawyer. He introduced himself politely and said his client wanted to discuss a fair resolution to the property situation. He mentioned a buyout offer. He said Ashley was willing to purchase my 50% share of the house at a reasonable price. I asked him to send the documents so I could review them. When they arrived, I sat down with a cup of coffee and read every page carefully. And that is when I saw it. The property appraisal was dated 6 weeks before I moved out. The market analysis was from 2 months ago. The contract drafts were detailed, polished, professional. This was not something a lawyer throws together in 2 weeks after a family dispute. This was months of preparation. I stared at that appraisal date for an hour, 6 weeks before I left. Ashley had hired someone to value the house, while I was still paying every bill, still keeping the lights on, still sitting across from her at dinner, believing we were family. She had been planning to push me out long before I ever decided to leave. I was not just being used, I was being set up, and I realized something that changed everything. If Ashley had been preparing for months, then I needed to be prepared too. Whatever came next, I would not be caught off guard again. The call came 3 weeks after I moved out. It was Aunt Linda, and her voice was softer than I had heard it in years. She said the family was worried about me. She said everyone wanted to heal and move forward. She said there would be a gathering at her house on Saturday afternoon, just close family, just to talk. She said Ashley missed me. I almost laughed at that last part, but I kept my voice neutral and told her I would be there. I knew exactly what this was. It was not a reconciliation. It was an ambush. But I had spent the past 3 weeks preparing for exactly this moment, and I was not going to let them catch me off guard. Not this time. I arrived at Aunt Linda's house exactly on time. The living room was arranged like a stage. Aunt Linda sat in her favorite armchair, positioned like a judge. Ashley sat on the couch, her expression carefully arranged into something that looked like concern, but did not reach her eyes. Cousin Marcus was there too, looking uncomfortable in the corner. A few other relatives filled the remaining seats, all of them watching me as I walked in. On the coffee table, I noticed a stack of papers and a pen. They were not even trying to hide what this really was. Aunt Linda gestured for me to sit in the empty chair facing everyone. She cleared her throat and began speaking in that rehearsed, sympathetic tone I had heard her use at funerals. Crystal, we are all so worried about you, living alone in some tiny apartment, cutting yourself off from family. It is not healthy. We have been talking, and we think maybe it is best if Ashley handles the house from now on. She is more stable. She has a real job. And frankly, this whole situation has been very stressful for her. She paused and slid the stack of papers toward me. Ashley has put together a very fair offer. She is willing to buy out your share of the house so everyone can move on. All you have to do is sign. I looked at the documents. The offer was for less than half of what my 50% share was actually worth. They expected me to give away my inheritance, my 8 years of payments, my entire financial contribution for a fraction of its value, and they expected me to do it quietly, gratefully, like the invisible sister I had always been. I looked up at Ashley. She was watching me with a small smile, the kind of smile you give when you think you have already won. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. Before I sign anything, I said calmly, I think everyone should see something. I placed the tablet on the coffee table and pressed play. The room went silent as Ashley's voice filled the air. It was a recording from a family dinner 8 months ago. Ashley was talking to one of her friends on the phone, not realizing I was still in the house. My sister is pathetic, her voice said clearly. She just sits at home all day pretending to work while living off me. Total loser. I swiped to the next recording. This one was from a barbecue 6 months ago. Ashley was talking to Aunt Linda in the kitchen. We need to figure out how to get Crystal out of the house, she said. The market is hot right now. If we wait too long, we will miss our chance. I swiped again. Another recording. Ashley telling a coworker that her sister was an unemployed loser that no man would ever want. The room was completely still. Aunt Linda's face had gone pale. Cousin Marcus stared at the tablet like it might bite him. Ashley's smile had vanished, replaced by something cold and furious. "You recorded me," she hissed. "That is illegal. You cannot do that." I kept my voice steady. "Actually, I can. Texas is a one-party consent state. That means I have every right to record conversations I'm part of, or conversations happening in my own home. I started recording family gatherings about a year ago, right after I overheard you talking about your plans for the house. I was not trying to build a case against you, Ashley. I just needed to know I was not imagining things. I needed to confirm that what I was hearing was real, and it was." I pulled out another document from my bag. It was the property appraisal that Ashley's lawyer had sent me. I held it up so everyone could see the date printed clearly at the top. "This appraisal is dated 6 weeks before I moved out," I said. 6 weeks. That means Ashley hired someone to value the house while I was still living there, still paying every bill, still keeping the lights on. She was planning to push me out before I ever packed a single bag. This was not a reaction to me leaving. This was the plan all along. I looked around the room at faces that refused to meet my eyes. "Let me walk you through the pattern," I continued. Year 1, I asked Ashley to contribute to the electricity bill. She cried, called Aunt Linda, and I became the villain for daring to ask. Year 3, I was dating David. Everything was going well until he suddenly decided I needed to get my life together. That happened right after he had a private conversation with Ashley. Year 5, Ashley started asking Aunt Linda questions about inheritance law. I know because Aunt Linda mentioned it to Cousin Marcus, who mentioned it to me at Christmas without realizing what he was saying. Year 8, Ashley has a full legal package ready to take my share of the house, complete with appraisals and contracts prepared months in advance. This is not random selfishness. This is a pattern, 8 years of manipulation, and I have documentation for almost all of it. Ashley stood up, her face twisted with rage. "You are paranoid," she shouted. "You have always been jealous of me. You have always resented that people actually like me while you sit alone in your room like some kind of hermit. This whole thing is pathetic." I looked at her calmly. "I do not have proof about David," I admitted. "I cannot prove what you said to him 5 years ago. But I have proof about everything else. And here is the thing, Ashley. When someone lies about small things for 8 years, you do not need a confession to know they lied about the big things, too." I stood up and gathered my things. My lawyer has reviewed my financial records. I have strong grounds for an unjust enrichment claim. 8 years of mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, and utilities, all documented, all coming from my account alone. I am not signing anything today. I am not signing anything ever. If you want to sell that house, Ashley, you will negotiate with me fairly. Or we can let a judge decide. That process takes 2 to 3 years. Your choice. I walked toward the door. Aunt Linda called after me, her voice cracking. "Crystal, wait. Let us talk about this." I did not stop. I did not turn around. I had spent 8 years waiting for someone in that family to see me, to hear me, to believe me. I was done waiting. I walked out without looking back. I did not need them to apologize. I did not need them to love me. I just needed them to know that I had seen everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every convenient silence. And for the first time in 8 years, I was not the one who was invisible. The truth was finally visible. And it was devastating. The weeks that followed the family meeting were quieter than I expected. I thought there would be more drama, more phone calls, more accusations. Instead, there was mostly silence. The family had seen the truth laid out in front of them, and they did not know how to respond. Some of them, I suspect, were embarrassed. Others were probably hoping the whole situation would just go away if they ignored it long enough. That was fine with me. I was not looking for apologies anymore. I was focused on building something new. I heard about Ashley through the usual channels. Cousin Marcus, who had always been the most neutral member of our family, would occasionally share updates when we talked. Ashley did not collapse the way I sometimes imagined she would during those 8 years of silent resentment. There was no dramatic downfall, no public humiliation, no moment where she lost everything and had to face the full weight of what she had done. Reality was more mundane than that. She lost her sales job about 3 weeks after the family meeting. I do not know if it was related to the stress or if her performance had been slipping for a while, but she had to find something new quickly. She ended up at a smaller company with lower commissions and less prestige. It was still a sales position, but it was not the kind of job she could brag about at parties anymore. Some of her friends stayed loyal. Others quietly distanced themselves when word of the family drama started spreading. Ashley had always been good at curating her image, but cracks were showing now. She sold most of her designer bags online. She returned the leased luxury car and got something more practical. She moved out of the house, our parents' house, and into a modest apartment in a middle-class neighborhood on the other side of town. It was not a terrible place. It was just ordinary, and for someone like Ashley, who had built her entire identity around being exceptional ordinary, felt like failure. For the first time in her 32 years, she was living without someone else subsidizing her existence. No parents paying her way through her 20s, no older sister covering every bill in her 30s. Just Ashley alone facing the reality of what her life looked like without a safety net. I will not pretend I felt nothing when I heard all this. There was a small petty part of me that felt satisfaction. But mostly, I just felt tired. I had spent so much energy being angry at Ashley, resenting her, waiting for karma to catch up with her. Now that it had, I realized the satisfaction was hollow. Her struggles did not give me back the 8 years I had lost. They did not restore the $240,000. They did not heal the wound David had left or erase the memory of my family laughing at me across that dinner table. Ashley's downgrade was not my victory. It was just the natural consequence of a life built on using other people. And now I wanted to focus on my own life, not hers. About 6 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Aunt Linda. Her voice sounded different than I had ever heard it before. Smaller somehow, uncertain. She did not call to apologize for how she had treated me. That would have required her to admit she was wrong, and Aunt Linda had never been good at admitting mistakes. Instead, she called because she was panicking. After the family meeting, something had been nagging at her. She kept thinking about the things I had said about patterns and manipulation and documentation. She started looking through her own financial records. 3 years ago, Ashley had offered to help her manage some investments. She said she knew someone who could get better returns than the bank. Aunt Linda had given her access to a retirement account. She trusted her. Ashley was family after all. When Aunt Linda finally checked that account, $23,000 was missing. Combined with the $15,000 in loans that Ashley had borrowed over the years and never repaid, my sister had taken nearly $40,000 from our aunt. I made excuses for her for years, Linda said, her voice shaking through the phone. I thought she was just young and irresponsible. I thought she would grow out of it. I did not want to believe she was capable of something like this. She paused, and I could hear her struggling to keep her composure. I owe you an apology, Crystal. I should have listened to you. I should have asked questions instead of assuming the worst about you. I thanked her for saying that. I meant it. But I also understood something important. Say na mamawait. Aunt Linda was not confessing out of guilt toward me. She was reaching out because she finally understood that she was a victim too. Sometimes people only see the truth when it affects them directly. I could not change that. I could only accept it. A few weeks later, Ashley showed up at my apartment. I had not given her my address, but finding it probably was not difficult. She knocked on my door one evening just as the sun was setting. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. She looked tired. Her clothes were simpler than what she used to wear. Her makeup was minimal, but what struck me most was her expression. The confidence was gone. The smugness that had always lingered behind her eyes had been replaced by something desperate. She did not come to apologize. Ashley had never learned how to apologize, and apparently losing everything still had not taught her. Instead, she came with a proposal. I have been thinking, she said, standing in my doorway without waiting to be invited in. You have the business mind. You always have, and I have connections. I know people. We could start something together. A consulting business maybe, or an online store, something where we both use our strengths. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. She was not offering partnership. She was grasping for a lifeline. She had burned through everyone else. The friends who used to fill her social media had disappeared when she could no longer afford bottle service and weekend trips. Aunt Linda was threatening legal action over the missing money. The rest of the family whispered behind her back now instead of mine. I was her last option. Not because she valued me, but because there was no one left. What connections? I asked quietly. The people who stopped answering your calls when you downgraded your car. The friends who vanished when the free drinks stopped flowing. Ashley opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She had no answer because we both knew I was right. Come back when you have learned to apologize before you ask for favor, I said. Then I will consider listening. I closed the door gently. I did not slam it. I did not need to make a dramatic point. I just needed her to understand that I was no longer available to be used. In the quiet weeks that followed, I started writing. Not for anyone else at first, just for myself. I wrote about what it felt like to be invisible in my own family. I wrote about the exhaustion of carrying financial burdens that no one acknowledged. I wrote about the moment I finally saw the truth and the courage it took to walk away. Eventually, I started a small blog. My first post got 47 views. Most of them were probably accidental clicks. But I kept writing, post after post about financial boundaries, about family dynamics, about the invisible labor that so many women carry without recognition. 2 months after I started, an admin from a women's financial independence group shared one of my articles. That night, I received over 200 messages. The stories poured in from women who recognized their own lives in my words. A 62-year-old in Ohio whose son had borrowed her retirement savings and never paid it back. A 45-year-old in California who had been paying her brother's mortgage for a decade while he called her controlling. A 70-year-old in Florida whose own grandson had stolen her identity to open credit cards. My story was not unique. It was universal. And that universality was more powerful than any viral moment could have been. I was not just healing myself, I was giving other women permission to see their own situations clearly. Forgiveness is not something anyone is entitled to just because they share your blood. It is a gift. And after 8 years of giving everything, my money, my time, my relationship, my self-worth, I finally understood something important. I get to choose who deserves my gifts now. And that choice, that freedom to decide who earns my trust and who does not, that was the real victory. Not Ashley's downfall, not the family's silence, just the quiet, powerful knowledge that I was finally in control of my own life. 3 months passed, and somewhere along the way, my life became my own again. The control I had discovered was not just a feeling anymore. It had become real in the smallest, most sacred ways. My studio apartment was tiny by most standards, just one main room with a kitchen tucked into the corner and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But every single corner of that space was mine. I chose the curtains, I arranged the furniture, I hung pictures on the walls that made me smile not because they impressed anyone but because I liked them. Morning light came through clean windows, and it fell across plants that I actually had time to tend now. For 8 years, I had been too exhausted to care for anything beyond the basics. Now I had a small collection of succulents on my windowsill and a pothos vine trailing down from a shelf above my desk. They were thriving. So was I. The best decision I made in those early months was adopting Lucky. He was a rescue dog, a scruffy mix of breeds that even the shelter could not identify. When I first met him, he looked at me with cautious brown eyes, like he was not sure if he could trust anyone ever again. I understood that feeling completely. I brought him home, and slowly, day by day, we learned to trust together. Now he greeted me every morning without judgment, his tail wagging the moment I opened my eyes. He did not care about my family drama or my bank statements or the $240,000 I had lost. He just wanted to be near me. That unconditional acceptance healed parts of me I did not even know were broken. My freelance business started growing in ways I had not anticipated. Without the constant emotional drain of my family situation, my creativity returned. I took on new clients. I raised my rates. I started saying no to projects that did not excite me. On Tuesday evenings, I joined a yoga class at a studio a few blocks from my apartment. I made friends there, women my age and older who knew nothing about Ashley, or the house, or the money. To them, I was just Crystal, the graphic designer who was pretty good at warrior pose. That anonymity was a gift. For the first time in 8 years, I woke up without dread. That peace alone was worth everything I had been through to find it. I still heard news about Ashley occasionally. Cousin Marcus would mention things when we talked, not gossiping exactly, just keeping me informed in his careful, neutral way. She was still working at the smaller sales company, still living in the modest apartment across town. Apparently, she was cooking her own meals, now something she had never done when I was around to order takeout on her behalf. She was dating someone, Marcus said. I listened to these updates and waited to feel something: satisfaction that she was struggling, anger that she was moving on, relief that she was not my problem anymore. But what I actually felt was nothing, just distance, a quiet recognition that this person who shared my blood had become a stranger. Ashley had unfriended me on all social media. I discovered this one evening when I idly searched for her profile. She had blocked me everywhere. At first, I felt a flicker of something, maybe hurt, maybe just surprise, but it faded quickly. There would be no dramatic reconciliation between us, no tearful apology at a coffee shop, no moment where she finally admitted everything and begged for forgiveness. We were just two sisters who had become strangers, and I realized that this was okay. Not every wound heals into a scar you can point to and explain. Some wounds just close quietly and stop hurting. That was enough. One evening, I sat down with my journal and wrote a letter I knew I would never send. It was addressed to Ashley, but it was really for myself. I do not hate you, I wrote. Hate would mean you still have power over me, and I took that power back the night I started downloading those receipts. I am just sad. Sad that you spent 8 years seeing me as an obstacle instead of a sister. Sad that Mom's last wish for us to take care of each other became a weapon you used against me instead of a bond that held us together. I hope you learn to build something real now. Not from me. From life itself, I will not be watching. But I hope you figure it out. I closed the journal when I finished. I did not cry. The words were for my own peace, not for Ashley's redemption. The message that changed everything came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. It was from a woman named Patricia, 61 years old, from Michigan. She had found one of my blog posts through a friend who shared it on social media. I have been paying my daughter's rent for 12 years, she wrote. Every time I mention it, she calls me selfish. Last night, I told her the payments stop next month. She screamed at me for an hour. She said I was abandoning her. But this morning, I woke up and felt something I have not felt in years. I think it was relief. Thank you for showing me I was not alone. I read her message twice, then typed back slowly. You are not alone, and it is not too late. It is never too late. When I pressed send, I realized something profound. My story was not about revenge. It was not even about justice. It was about permission. I was giving other women permission to see their situations clearly, to set boundaries without guilt, to choose themselves after years of choosing everyone else. On a quiet morning, not long after I sat on my small balcony with a cup of coffee, Lucky was curled at my feet, his warmth pressing against my ankles. Sunlight fell across my face, and I closed my eyes and just breathed. My phone buzzed with another message. Another woman who had read my blog asking how to start documenting her own finances. I smiled and began to type a response. As I did, I thought about my mother's last words to me. Take care of your sister. For 8 years, I had tried to honor that promise. I had given everything I had. But my mother had also raised me to be strong, to be smart, to know my own worth. Maybe taking care of myself was what she had really meant all along. Maybe I'm family too. People ask me sometimes if I regret those 8 years. The money, the silence, the sacrifice. I tell them the truth. I regret not seeing clearly sooner, but I do not regret learning the lesson. Some people will take everything you give and call you selfish when you stop. That is not a reflection of your generosity. It is a reflection of their entitlement. And you do not owe anyone your entire life just because they share your last name. I did not just pay off the bills. I settled a debt of dignity one they owed me for far too long. And I finally paid myself the debt I had been ignoring for 8 years. The freedom to live as myself, for myself, with nothing hidden and no one to perform for. Mom asked me to take care of family. I finally understood what that meant. It starts with taking care of myself, because I am family too. And that freedom, that clarity, that peace, it was worth every single dollar of that $240,000. Honestly, it was priceless. If Crystal's story resonated with you, I hope you carry one truth with you today. Your generosity is a gift, but it should never cost you your dignity, your peace, or your entire life savings. Too many of us, especially women, have been taught that sacrifice equals love. We pay the bills, keep the peace, and stay silent while others take credit for our labor. We tell ourselves that family is everything, that good daughters and good sisters do not complain. But love that only flows in one direction is not love. It is exploitation, and you deserve so much better than that. Start paying attention to where your money goes and who benefits from your silence. Document everything, not because you expect betrayal, but because clarity is power. Keep records of what you pay, what you give, and what you sacrifice. Set boundaries even when it feels uncomfortable, even when people call you selfish for doing so. The people who truly respect you will understand. The people who get angry were never on your side to begin with. Remember this: you cannot pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who only see you as a resource. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever given everything and been called ungrateful for stopping, know that you are not alone. Thank you for listening to Crystal's journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever experienced something similar? What would you have done in Crystal's place? Share your thoughts because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to find their own courage.